Hi there. What you're about to see is a talk between me and Matthew Miller, the current Fedora project leader, regarding Fedora Flatpaks, the OBS Fedora situation, and just generally how Flatpaks fit into what Fedora is doing. Now, normally a talk like this would be available over on my podcast channel, that being Tech Over Tea, but considering this is a much shorter talk and it's a lot more focused, not super focused, it made more sense to upload here. More people are going to see it, but if you'd like to see more talks like this, the podcast is where you go. That is Tech Over Tea on YouTube. It's available on Spotify and various other platforms as well. If you search Tech Over Tea, you will find it. So without further ado, here's the video. I don't know what this video is. I'm probably going to put this on the main channel. I'm not too sure. But today we have Matthew Miller here. He reached out to me. Actually, before we get into that, you are technically still the Fedora project leader.
Yes, I am. We haven't gotten a replacement yet, and once we do, I want to have a little bit of overlap. The Fedora Linux 42 release is going to be, I think, the handover moment because, you know, that's an auspicious nerd number. And also, my first Fedora release as project leader was 21, so doubling it seemed like a pretty good end point.
Right. I don't know if you guys have said anything about who's going to take that role, or if there is anyone lined up for that role or not.
We are in progress.
Okay. Okay, so there's definitely contenders there, but you can't really say anything yet.
Yeah, I'm afraid not.
Okay, no, that's totally fair.
It's some good competition, I'll say that.
Oh, yeah, no, I could definitely expect that. Fedora has a lot of very competent people involved in the project. There is no shortage of people who would be able to fill a role like that. Maybe not as good as you've been doing over these years.
Thank you.
But there's definitely no shortage of, if you need someone immediately, there's someone there.
Yeah, it's a pretty robust project, I guess.
So, okay. You reached out to me to talk about the Fedora Flatpak and OBS situation, and
I thought we could chat about it a little bit.
Yeah. I have strong opinions about it. You have the Fedora perspective there. Someone from the Joel who filed the legal claim against OBS, he commented on my video. From at least from the OBS side, he agreed with a lot of the things that I brought up, but you said that there are things that maybe I got wrong that you wanted to correct, and yeah. But before we get into like any of the stuff that we disagree on, let's just foundational stuff. What is Fedora Flatpak, and why does Fedora Flatpak exist?
Yeah, so Fedora Flatpak is our Flatpaks that we construct in our build system out of RPM packages. So Fedora, at its core, we are a packaging project. We take things and we integrate them all together into Fedora Linux. And traditionally, we've done that through RPMs. And in some ways, this is an experiment in distributing things in a different way. We also do some things where we provide Docker containers for like Postgres and things like that are Fedora. So this was kind of in that vein. When we started doing this, FlatHub was very young, and it wasn't quite clear that was whether it was going to be there's one registry for everything kind of situation, or whether there'd be lots of registries everywhere. And we were also asked by Red Hat Legal to not have FlatHub be basically an easy to install option. And we worked on that for a while, and so things have changed. So now, at first we had a version of FlatHub that was a filtered view, which I think was very confusing because basically it was a FlatHub where you couldn't see everything and you had no idea why not.
Right.
So now we have just kind of, if you opt into third-party repositories, you just get it all there.
What was the criteria for filtered FlatHub? Just before we go on further from that.
Sorry, what's that?
What was the criteria for the filtered FlatHub? So what was being filtered out?
I'm not completely sure, but I think it's a matter of legal risk that whatever those were, and I'm going to leave that vague because that's the whole point of that, I
Sure.
guess.
But I do agree it was
Um,
confusing, yes.
yeah, but why do we have these? I think I kind of have to go back to the dawn of time to really explain this. And
Mhm.
there's actually, even before we're talking about the Flatpak um, packaging format, there's a tension that we've had between some developers, upstream and distro,
Mhm.
and like I've seen this in Debian too. It's not like a Fedora specific thing, and generally we work very well with our upstreams. That's one of our basic principles of how we do things.
Mhm.
Upstream first. It's not it's not officially one of our mottos, but it's there.
Right.
Um, but back in the dawn of time when we started distros, so I've been doing Linux for like, I don't know, 30 years now almost,
Mhm.
and working on distros specifically since 1999, I think. So things were very different back then. It was really hard to get a working system together with Linux, and basically, there's a lot of open source software out there, not as much as there is now, but a lot of it. But most of it was distributed on like an FTP site in a tarball as source code somewhere. You didn't really get like, here's a nice polished build. And
Mhm.
so, and it was all scattered around all sorts of different things. So distributions are basically an integration project to take all of that and make it be nice and polished. Uh, and especially back then, like it wasn't always easy. Like often now, if you know what you're doing, it is
Mhm.
fairly simple to build most things. If it's C, you untar it and then you do configure and then make, and there it goes.
Mhm.
Make install maybe. It didn't used to be that consistent. A lot of different developers, different people would have completely different practices, and everything would work a different way. It was hard to figure out how to build things, and then they would have different opinions about how to organize stuff. Like there was a guy who there's a software called Qmail, which was a email processing server.
Mhm.
uh, that guy wanted to put everything under var, which is supposed to be for like your variable data on your system and not supposed to be where your actual stuff lives.
Mhm.
It was all, and so people had all these different opinions about where things should go and how it should be. And so a distro, one of the other things about
Mhm.
distros, we basically have rules about, okay, that we're going to make it all work together nicely so that as a sysadmin or a user, you can basically assume, even if you haven't worked with this package before, it's
Mhm.
going to fit basic standards of the distribution.
Right.
Um, so um, in doing that, kind of like Debian and all the other di- proto distributions, a lot of the people we attracted to the project, the work is we're going to take the software out there that's hard for users to get and hard for users to access, and make it nice and present it to them as um, a polished sort of way.
Mhm.
And there's always been developers who care about users and care about that path. And there even still today there are ones that don't. They're just like, I'm dumping my code out here. Good luck, and
Yeah.
that's cool. And as a user, it's hard to always know what is what.
Mhm.
But I do think that's been a really big change in the last, like I said, 20 years, where there's a lot more software where it's, the upstream is very polished and organized. It has, releases, something like OBS. They've got to have that. Uh, and so in those cases, yeah, all the things that people are frustrated with,
Mhm.
it isn't just the Flatpak, but when when a distro makes a package and makes different decisions than the developer, that can cause all sorts of difficulty, and we
Mhm.
may be providing that value um, that we try to there. So that's a long way of saying I think something like OBS, we're not really providing anything by packaging that.
Mhm.
um, I think there is an overall place for the Fedora Flatpaks, because FlatHub, uh, part of the reason it's so popular is there's a double-edged sword kind of thing. It's so
Mhm.
popular because the rules are fairly lax about what can go into FlatHub, and the idea is you throw in, but we want to make it as easy for developers to get their things to users, which
Mhm.
is cool, but um, there's not really much of a review. The thing that says verified just is verifying that it's from the developers themselves, and it doesn't necessarily verify that it was built with good practices. Maybe it was built in a coffee shop on some laptop or whatever. which could be infected with malware or whatever could happen. Where the Fedora system, we build it in our pipes. Basically our whole build system is set up to be a secure pipeline,
Mhm.
and so you can have more trust as a user that this package software is going to be what it says it is, and that it's going to behave in a way that is um, you know friendly towards the user. And I will give an example of something that I installed for Flat Hub. I was trying to get a nice GUI thing that would show me like my system's hardware stats thing,
Mhm.
because I think this was when Linus Tech Tips was playing with Linux, and they were complaining that there was no such thing. And I was like, "There's got to be." So I was
There's
looking.
a bunch
Anyways,
of them.
yeah, but I one of them ones I picked seemed to do nothing, and it turns out that what it actually was doing was there was no graphical application. It was just a script. It was running that script in the background, and that script then uploaded my system stats to a server somewhere. Like,
Oh, yep. Okay.
what? Yeah, right. Like, and but that's probably I think that's specifically been fixed, but no one's checking for things like that, and there's not necessarily even agreement that that was bad. So, um, I'm not trying to be down on FlatHub,
Mhm.
because I think FlatHub is a great and a really really good resource. But that is a distinction between the way we do things in Fedora, and in a lot of ways, FlatHub is a kind of a competing distribution to
Mhm.
Fedora's packaging of all these applications. And so, um, I guess I also need to talk about Fedora and opinions, right?
Mhm.
Because there are a lot of different people, and I am technically the voice of Fedora, but um, it can never really be a completely unified voice,
Sure.
because there's a lot of things we just don't consistently agree on. And so, whether like the people who work on, sorry, I want to be careful. Some of the people who work on just the core, like the core GNOME distribution or KDE or those kind of things, think, look, this is the important part. We're putting together this core operating system, and the applications that's out there in the different rings, and someone else should worry about that. Fedora should focus on this little part.
Mhm.
But like I said, a lot of people have come to Fedora really from, here's an application that I like and I use. I want to make sure that's packaged up, and they've done a diligent job for the last decade or whatever of making sure that that package is in good shape.
Mhm.
And I don't think we want to kick those people out of the project, especially because in a lot of cases there isn't really a diligent upstream.
I don't know what happened there. You were saying, you don't want to cut out your
Yeah.
packages.
Yeah, people have been working at this for a long time, and basically doing user support for people and those kind of things. That's an important part of the project too, and
Mhm.
people doing that have done a lot of good work. So even when it's not like a problem with the upstream, we often find things where the license that they say it's distributed under isn't actually, like, there's some parts of it that aren't really open source, and
Mhm.
we've in the past worked with people to fix those things and make find open source parts to it, or get the licensing statement right if that's all it is.
Mhm.
Um, and so that you can be sure that everything in Fedora really is reviewed as open source, at least to the best of our knowledge. Of course, there's a lot of code,
Mhm.
and surely some things slip through, but
Sure.
that's the intention. And I don't want to say that's people in the project shouldn't be doing that anymore. Uh, but again, I think there's also a case by case basis when it's something like LibreOffice or whatever. Um, the developer packaging probably is the best. Um, but we have still some unanswered questions like that. So one
Mhm.
of the things is, when we ship a Fedora edition, a product basically. I put product in quotes because we don't sell anything, and
Sure.
my employer Red Hat would like to me not be confused about what products are. But um, when we ship something like that to users, all of the code we have there is something that we've built from source and know we can build from source again,
Mhm.
um, which wouldn't be the case if we would, say we wanted to have something for Home Assistant, for
Mhm.
example. Home Assistant software, it's not packaged in Fedora. It's not Flatpak, but there's Docker containers for it, which is a
Mhm.
great way to run it. But if we were to ship some sort of like Fedora IoT with home batteries installed, Home Assistant like that, we would probably want that to be our own build rather than the upstream build, unless we've never done anything different than that. Maybe we could do something where we're collaborating, but so far that's not been a thing. It's just
Mhm.
if we're building it, we ship it. And I think that as we are going to more and more of the immutable OS, where Flatpaks are more important because we do have that separate atomic desktop kind of thing, and then Flatpaks are the way to get applications on there. Um, we're going to need to figure that out. And so for now, I think Fedora versions of them are there. I think one of the problems is that, and I don't know how to solve this,
Mhm.
that you don't know what you installed as a user,
Sure.
and we don't want to shout at somebody, "Hey, you've picked the wrong version," or put a list of, "If you want to have these properties, pick this version. If you want to," like that's confusing. But I think people should know where they, where it's best to go to help, and whose fault this is.
Right. And this
Yeah,
is
I think if
uh,
if people, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say this is a problem that Ubuntu has sort of put itself into, where um people installing with apt in certain cases will install the snap. It's just a redirect over to the snap. So it's in some cases, like with Firefox, like that's intended with upstream, like upstream wanted that. Um but I believe they do the same thing with Steam as well. And this creates a really weird issue where Ubuntu users installed it with apt, thought they were getting the Debian package, then got the snap, so they might send the bug reports to Steam, where they don't have anything to do with that, where it's actually a bug with the snap system. This is sort of the same issue that arises here, where if somebody installs the OBS Flatpak or whatever application ends up being, and they thought they were getting the Flatpak from FlatHub, but they end up actually getting the Fedora Flatpak, it creates this confusion of it's still the same software, but the issue at hand might not be because of the package they thought they got. It was actually, or because of the software they got, it's because of the packaging they got.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I don't know I'm not a designer. I don't know what a great solution is for that. I think that there probably could be something that's better. I would like for Fedora package things like going to Ask Fedora is probably the first thing. And honestly, if you're not sure which package you're using or whatever, if you're using it on Fedora, bring it there, and people will help you figure out where to take it if you're having
Mhm.
problems with anything. But obviously, people are also going to go right to the upstreams again, especially, and I think ironically, like the more helpful the upstream tries to be, the more people are going to be like, "Oh, that's the obvious place to be," and then
Mhm.
it gets a little bit confusing.
Right.
Um, One of the other things I wanted to talk about with Flatpak in general is the security and like the sandboxing around it. So, although this is nothing to do with OBS because I don't have I'm not causing them of anything malicious,
Mhm.
but like I said, stuff in the Flatpak in FlatHub is not really reviewed for in detail and can do a lot of things. And uh, Flatpak, basically, the developer defines what their permissions are. So there's a sandbox, but the sandbox is basically what what the person who put it there is.
Right.
And one can imagine that if you are going to put malware there, you might make your sandboxing pretty loose.
Well, one of the things you can
And
do is just say, I want full file system access, and then you can just do anything.
right, yes, and this is a problem versus um, Android, Apple have pretty they have strong leverage against their application developers to use, make it work in their sandbox. They
Yeah, they're
could
models the other way
basically
around, where they request permissions and then the user grants them, whereas Flatpak, it's they get the permissions and then you could reject them later.
yeah, but again, going back to the dawn of time, it didn't used to be that way.
Mhm.
And in fact, Android had much weaker sandboxing. Like you could read the whole file system from one app and
Mhm.
things like that, which turns out to be bad. And so they slowly tightened it, and then app developers had to adjust.
Mhm.
So I think with the Linux ecosystem, we don't really have the way to tighten that kind of thing on app developers.
Mhm.
And so the answer to make this work, so Flatpak actually has that kind of ask as you go along functionality, but in order to do that, your program has to use portals, which KDE and GNOME both agree on this. But If you're not, then it can't have that feature at all. So, um, and there's not really a strong incentive for developers to do that because, well, first of all, of course, my software is not going to be bad. So why should I, work on sandboxing it?
Mhm.
Um, excuse me. But it's just, yeah, kind of extra work. And I don't know. I don't know how to solve that. I would like to get to the utopian world where we have that same security for applications, and you can. It would be nice to be able to install things from completely untrusted places and know that they can't do anything to harm your system. And that's not the case with it right now.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so um, I think that the Fedora Flatpaks in general have a better supply chain security story when it comes right down to it. That's one of the things that people were arguing about in the OBS situation, where one of the libraries that OBS uses to the GUI library was
Mhm.
out of date in their version of it, and there's some known security vulnerabilities and so on. We try to keep all of those things up to date and make sure everything is patched across the distro, even when it's difficult.
Mhm.
I think that really is one of the best ways to keep your system secure. And because the sandboxing isn't very strong, that can really be a problem.
Mhm.
One can, like the XZ thing that happened before. If XZ is just one place, it's not that hard of an update. But if you've got 100 flat packs from different places, like how many of them have which? And in this case, that malware was only targeted against one particular thing, but it
Mhm.
could have been something else. And if you've got 100 different sources and no consistency to it, it's pretty hard to manage that.
Sure. In that regard, you said with the out of date dependencies, I would say, is there any reason why that needs to be done in a downstream like Fedora rather than working with upstream to improve their packaging?
Yeah, and in general, like I said, upstream first is one of the mottos, and people do try to work with the upstream, and that's something packagers should do. Sometimes it's complicated, and sometimes upstream has uh, just a different approach and different priorities there
Mhm.
as well. Um, a lot of times developers don't really care about that the way I think that a lot of people in Fedora come from a sysadmin world uh, and kind of that operations kind of mindset
Mhm.
about making sure that it is production ready, even if it's not for the enterprise. It's you want something that's solid for end users
Mhm.
as well. And um, I think this is people in ops may have unfair stereotypes of developers, but uh, the developer stereotype is they grab whatever things are out there. It works. Okay, now don't touch it, which is not sustainable for security. And I think most developers know that too.
Mhm.
But part of the idea of having a distro was to keep all those things consistent, so that it's easier for everyone, including the developers.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that these kind of things end up being in tension with everything else, and I don't have a solution to everything, but that's part of why things are the way they are, I guess.
So basically, it kind of like took us 20 minutes to get to an explanation of what Fedora Flatpak
Yeah,
was. We
yeah,
got a little bit roundabout here.
a lot of background, but
The TLDR of Fedora Flatpak is basically it is built off of the Fedora RPM build system, and because that is more well tested and sort of intended, even if not entirely for the enterprise, designed in a way as if an enterprise user was going to use it. The idea is this is more well tested and more secure in a lot of cases, not every case.
yeah, I think I may have put enterprise in there too strongly.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, this isn't like a Red Hat made us do it for
Right,
RHEL
right,
kind of
right.
thing. It's the right thing to do to make a secure distribution for users. But yeah,
Right.
that's basically it.
Mhm.
Um, I I would like to be a world where if people weren't interested in making the flat packs themselves as developers, like we could have Fedora flat packs being pushed to FlatHub as a service, Fedora being a place to package things together. That never came to be, so and it probably won't, just because it's a lot of work and FlatHub seems to be going on just fine as it is. Uh,
Well,
But yeah.
what I was going to say is, whilst historically it makes sense why there is this split between FlatHub and Fedora Flatpaks, with the way it is now, where it's clear that FlatHub is just, it's not going to change. It is the place where people get Flatpaks. Is there any reason why, again, the Fedora Flatpak needs to exist rather than just, collaborating with FlatHub and sort of merging this all into one? Because I can see there being value in, especially for those unofficial packages, where Fedora helps those Flatpaks be a better Flatpak than they would be just by some random developer making it. I do see there possibly being some value in exploring that route.
Yeah, I think some of it is we've got a tool, the hammer of we put this through RPM, and that is the way all of our processes work, and so people are inclined to look at it that way.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think people going and working with the upstreams is also helpful.
Mhm.
Um, some ways it's kind of hard to keep that feeling like it's all under a Fedora project banner,
Mhm.
and like rather than the individual people going off and working on an upstream. So maybe that's something we could work on. I don't know, building a group of people that are interested in that kind of thing to
Mhm.
work that way. Um, it would definitely be a worthwhile thing to try, I think.
The
Uh,
FlatHub integration SIG.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know if that would solve all of the problems, but yeah, I think people are really proud of a lot of the work that they've done to make upstream software better. That's part of what we do in Fedora. You know, um, there's a temptation when you're working with open source to just be like, okay, well, I got that. I made some improvements. Sure, I'll publish the source code, but I don't need to do the work of going back to the developers. And it turns out that in the long run, that's a really hard way to do it, because now you're owning the maintainership of this different thing. And if you can get that back to the upstream, like it's better, it's easier for you, and it's not sustainable really to do it at scale in any other way.
Mhm.
Um, and it helps benefit everybody that way. Even if you're not if you're not a Fedora user, you get better open source software. So yeah, I think that's been part of Fedora's mission all along, and I think we need to maybe figure out how we can adapt that for this world.
I think an area where Fedora Flatpak really does fail is explaining the value of it to people who don't already just happen to have it. Like, why... With it existing, with it overlaying existing packages, right? If someone's looking at trying to download a Flatpak, they see it's on FlatHub, they know about Fedora Flatpak, and they see the package in these two locations. I don't think it does a good job at explaining why that is the case, and you're doing a good job here. It's just getting that message out to people who might benefit from using those packages.
Yeah, I think part of it is we don't want to bad talk things or sound scary, and
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to present this in a way that isn't. You don't want it to be like, watch out, don't install from FlatHub, it might not be secure. Um, and you also don't look. There's already enough information. People are inundated with. If you look at the GNOME software screen, there's a lot of information there actually,
Mhm.
and um, there's not. I don't know. Maybe again, I'm not a designer. Maybe there's something that could be done to better present things.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some issues with the way that GNOME software presents and FlatHub
And
presents things like the safety of an application, where it will say this is potentially dangerous, or sorry, what is it, potentially unsafe? Is that the phrase it uses? I don't want to get that wrong. Potentially unsafe. Where it has
yeah,
like a
that's
list of permissions.
toned down from what it was before. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think that um, some of the safety might be overstated on the
Mhm.
things that you know uh, aren't sandboxed or all those kind of things.
Mhm.
Um, I think those like safety labels are a good idea in general, but yeah, there's arguments about what is safe and what it means and all that.
Right.
I think another thing that is, I don't know, GNOME software as an application is not something that is like very well resourced, because the companies that are putting together enterprise distributions or corporate distributions, like their customers are not installing stuff randomly from that. They have some sort of centralized mechanism, and um, whether it's satellite or Ansible or whatever to control installing your application. So that doesn't really come into it.
Mhm.
So there's not a lot of like interest in funding that from companies, and there just isn't like there's no market for a Linux desktop operating system that's going to bring in any money. Um, Good job, Endless, for trying as much as heroically as they could.
Mhm.
Um, but and then with Canonical going off in a different direction for their Snaps thing, you know, it's all volunteer effort. So the people working on that, even people who are paid by Red Hat or some other company,
Mhm.
um, they're doing that out of love, not out of their day job.
Right, right. A lot
So
of them are paid to do a job and then do this on the side as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so unless you
I,
got
know,
some.
I think I've covered everything I wanted to say here.
Okay.
But if you,
Yeah, no, I do have some. I do have some stuff I definitely want to talk about.
yeah, sure.
So when it comes to how Fedora handles packaging upstream, this is getting to the OBS stuff. Handles packaging upstreams that don't want to be packaged in, whether it's Fedora Flatpaks, whether it's in Fedora's regular RPM system. The with this situation, it really did explode. Just it people not paying attention. It kind of seemed like it exploded just out of nowhere.
Yes, it certainly felt like that to me.
Mhm.
Um, I knew that the workstation group was discussing some of these things, but I didn't. There's FOSDEM, a bunch of stuff going on. It hadn't really gotten to my attention. Several people did send it to me, so
Sure.
thank you, several people. But yeah, and this is also a problem in Fedora as an old project. We've gotten kind of scattered, and sometimes it's just not easy to see, where the missing treads are as you're walking up the stairs. And I think that the Flatpak SIG repo that got filed against is something that no one was really monitoring closely,
Mhm.
especially not for something so as important as that. And we also didn't have any particular signposts saying, "Hey, this is not a great place to put this." So I understand why the reporter felt like they were being ignored,
Mhm.
even though there was ongoing conversation in a different ticket and a whole different different Git forge.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I do think this all better communication all around would have helped.
Mhm.
Often the case, and easy to say in retrospect.
Right, right. Yeah, like it's easy to say. Well, I think there's, as you said, this is an old project, so there's a lot of this disconnected infrastructure. If you were to design everything from the ground up, I'm sure you could think of ways where, okay, you could like the way that GitHub and GitLab work, where you can like link to a slug and it'll send you directly over to that issue or that pull request. If you were to design the Fedora infrastructure from the ground up, I'm sure you'd think of a way where, okay, if I link to this, it automatically sends you over here, so you can like easily keep those conversations connected together.
Yeah, and hopefully, actually, so Fedora is moving to Forgio as our Git forge, and hopefully we'll have some opportunities to do that. I'm hoping we can bring some of the people who scattered out to different parts of the world back into our centralized
Mhm.
Git forge. And actually, I think I'll probably be out of the out of the role of making the policies at this point. But I would like to ask all the different Fedora teams to, even if that's not going to be their central spot,
Mhm.
like have a page that's up to date that says where to go. Like for this team, CoreOS, most of the stuff is on the GitHub under this thing here. Go there,
Mhm.
and I hope that can be kind of a central place where it'll be obvious to try and look there.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, we can hopefully do some of those, little automated things that tie things together. That would be nice.
Mhm. So the main point I'm sort of wanting to talk about here is, how should Fedora handle upstreams that don't want to be packaged? Like the OBS case here, where they did not want there to be a package in Fedora Flatpak. Or another example is obviously Bottles, which has made a lot of noise about the packaging in the Fedora RPM as well.
Yeah, I think we probably shouldn't do it. We
Mhm.
should let we should respect people's wishes there.
Mhm.
Um, at least when it is a open source project working in good faith. There may
Mhm.
be some other cases where the software, um, say theoretically, there's somebody who has commercial interests in something and they uh, only want to release it
Sure.
from their thing, even though it's open source. We might want to actually like, well, it's open source. We can provide things.
Right.
We in that case we might end up having a different name or something.
Mhm.
But yeah, I can imagine situations where it makes sense to have it packaged in Fedora still.
Mhm.
Uh, but in general, especially again when it's a friendly, successful open source project, we
Mhm.
should be friendly
Yeah.
return.
Yeah, the name thing is something in case people forget history. Like that's happened before with Mozilla, with Firefox and Debian, where Mozilla back then was like really picky about people making modifications to the package. So they basically said you got to like change the name. So that's how we got like IceCat and the rest of
Yeah,
their sweet name like that.
and they were having a real problem at the time of people taking Firefox and basically putting malware into it, adware,
Yeah,
spyware, and
yeah.
then it's Firefox. So I
Mhm.
understand why they were so strict about that, but it was kind of frustrating.
Mhm.
We in Fedora have basically the same rules. If you want to take Fedora Linux and uh, do something out of what, make your own thing out of it, put your own software on whatever, you can do that. But we ask you not to call it Fedora, which is a Fedora remix brand you can use in some cases. Otherwise, pick your own name. It's all open source, but the name is ours.
Yeah.
And I understand that for the upstream as well. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, no, the name is completely understandable, especially if you do have a trademark to it already. Even if you don't, like it's common courtesy to not name the thing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and depending on the legalities, like you don't necessarily have to register a trademark to have trademark kind of protections under things.
Mhm.
So hopefully lawyers can stay out of the whole thing because that always makes the situations a lot more complicated,
Mhm.
and we can just get along talking like human beings who care about making good software and getting it to users.
Mhm. So, how do you think things should be handled in the future? Obviously, this is going to be a bit hard to say without things happening, but how do you think things should be handled in the future to ensure that it doesn't get to this state? Because obviously, the legal threats, like that's big deal there. Like that's we are going to make this happen no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to always predict. I mean, the next thing will be something else. We can
Sure,
always say,
sure.
like, we can monitor the repos or whatever. I do think that having a more central system will help and make it easier to figure out where to go for these kind of things. Um, and I think also we're maybe working on some policies about, how to work with upstreams just to make sure that we're consistent. I think most people in the project are, but want to make sure that we kind of put out that if the upstream doesn't want it packaged, like talk to them and see if there's something that can be arranged.
Mhm.
And the end state might actually be it still ends up packaged, but in a different way or some other thing. Or like you said, maybe the whatever problem that was making somebody want a separate Fedora package, maybe that can get fixed upstream.
Mhm.
Um, Again, better for everybody.
I think there's a lot less disagreement here than maybe you initially thought. Like, that video. Obviously, I got kind of heated because I am very much in favor of doing as much upstream as possible, and I think people kind of mistake my stance here. I do think there is value in downstream packaging, but I think we're in this situation where things are changing, where the downstream distro is, I guess, it's becoming less important. It's more of the core packages, like your glibcs and things like that. Like that's where the distro really still shines. But a lot of the user facing software, a lot of that is moving into other packaging solutions like Flatpaks, where essentially Flatpak or FlatHub is a universal distro that you use on top of on top of your distro. So it doesn't really matter what you're running at your core, you're still going to get that same version of the software.
Yeah. I do feel like, I mean, as a Linux distro person and a Fedora representative, I think
Sure.
it does matter what you've got running at the core there. And we really, I mean, we put in a lot of work to
Mhm,
make it look like it doesn't matter and everything just works smoothly.
mhm,
It didn't used to be that way, and that's through a lot of people's hard effort. Uh, and I do think people have, put in that effort into the stuff that wasn't just on that core as well. Like I said, there are definitely different opinions across the project on this.
mhm,
So I don't know what this may be for the next project leader, something to figure out
mhm, mhm.
how to bring some unity there. But I do agree that things have changed in the world, and that um, there's more of a product mindset in open source in general, and people doing release engineering and people caring about supply chain security. I talked about that a lot in Fedora, but we don't have a monopoly on that, and we're not perfect. Upstream projects can and do have really solid supply chain security in many cases. So um, actually, I also shouldn't say supply chain security. That's the word, but it's the wrong metaphor. But
Sure.
that's a whole different talk.
Mhm, mhm. One last thing I wanted to get to is, as always, Phoronix will take a singular comment and then base an entire article around it. There was one talk by, or one comment on that thread, about reordering the Flatpak repos, and like, I think it was by Michael Catanzaro, who said at some point in the future he wanted to move GNOME software to be focused only on Flatpaks and remove the RPM component from that. And it's just like a one offhand comment, but do you have any thoughts on that happening at some point?
Um, yeah, I think that I can definitely say we don't have a unified voice in
Oh, I can
Fedora on
expect
what
that.
that's going to do, right? And a lot of people, really um, like the approach we have now. Um, I personally, taking off my Fedora project leader hat, I think that that is probably the best way to go for the future.
Mhm.
Um, Even if that does mean that we're packaging some things up ourselves, and maybe we are packaging them up and we're doing that in FlatHub or something like that. Um, because I think that having Atomic OS is the future,
Mhm.
and Flatpak is the best application story on top of that for
Mhm.
desktop applications.
Mhm.
And I do hope developers start using portals and things so we can have it all work nicely and uh, securely. Uh, but that's kind of a far off future.
Sure, sure.
Right now, we have a lot of things there, and there are still things that don't work as well when they're in the Flatpak because of the sandbox model,
Sure.
like Chrome, which has its own sandboxing, doesn't work very
Yeah,
well. That's
Steam has
kind of
similar issues in
important.
that regard as well.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, so I don't know what the future is, but I like that idea of having it separated like that.
Mhm.
But again, putting my Fedora project leader hat back on, definitely not universal agreement on that. And I think that probably Michael's view and mine is a minority view in a lot of the um, Fedora project as a whole. But I don't know. I could be surprised.
I think that is a kind of important point to hammer home. Fedora is a big project, and whilst things can look as if this is the stance of the Fedora project, oftentimes you're going to have people who are, relatively big names in the project, who've been around for a long time, who have fundamental disagreements about some of the directions things are going. Obviously, they agree more often than they don't, otherwise they wouldn't be in the project, but not everything is a consensus.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Um, I think one of the things about a community really is that you have that shared interest in working on something that is strong enough that you
Mhm.
can disagree about things and even disagree with decisions that have been made and are going away that like you wouldn't have wanted to go that way, but it is. But the whole is still important enough to you, and you see the value that you stay there.
Mhm.
Without that, it's not really a community; it's just
Yeah.
a collection of people.
Okay, I think we've pretty much hit on like most of the stuff that is important to touch. Is there anything else you want to get into before we sign off?
I think those are the main things. Just the there's a long history here, and the world's changed.
Mhm.
People all mean well, really, and communication is hard. And I don't know. We don't know what the future will bring. I guess those are the things. Thank
So,
you for
oh,
talking.
yeah,
Nice.
no, absolute pleasure. Yeah. If you want to come back on when you're in, what's the new role you're moving to? Because obviously it's like,
I'm going to I'm going to be a manager. So
okay.
well, but I hope to be doing some good things there with the way Red Hat works with communities and making the future brighter still. Um,
Yeah, for anyone who forgot about the separation, this is a totally like fine separation. This isn't like I'm leaving the project. I hate Fedora now. Like it's moving on to different
yeah,
things in your life.
yeah, and there are definitely some parts that I'll be like, well, I don't need to do that anymore. That's somebody else's worry, and that will
Mhm.
be nice for my sleep. Uh,
I, I
but other,
I guess
yeah,
it'll be nice not being the face of Fedora for once in how many years has it been?
it's been almost 11 years,
Right.
so
Yeah, a bit of time.
it's also get a chance, I think.
So, if people want to like get involved in Fedora and all that stuff, where can they go?
So I think the best place is to come to discussion.fedoraproject.org and look for the water cooler section, just which is kind of the off-topic fun area. Introduce yourself, say hi. Then we do have like a join Fedora special interest group that can kind of help guide you in. But mostly, rather than coming in and looking for like what's my first issue to get involved with, like just getting to know people, getting involved in the community a little bit, and then you'll find things that are naturally the things you want to do. I think that is uh, the best way to get involved. Or if discussion forum isn't for you and you like Matrix instead, join one of the Matrix rooms, Fedora Space. Say hi that way. Uh, uh, we used to have virtual release parties during
Mm.
COVID times. They've kind of fallen apart since then. And that was also a good way to come and see what's going on. I don't know. We may end up doing some of those kind of things again. But I would say the social aspect is the first place to start, and the technical can follow, or non-technical, because there's a lot of need in the project for people, designers, like I said, all
Translation,
the
documentation, yeah.
yeah, people doing podcasts, that kind of thing. It's important. Mm.
So, anything else you want to direct people to, or is that pretty much everything?
I think we got it.
I don't know how to sign this off because this
Yeah, yeah.
this is like yeah, it's not a it's technically the podcast format, but like there's a lot shorter form and like very focused on a topic. So I think this is gonna go on the main channel. I think that's what we're gonna do. Maybe I'll make it an ad for the podcast. Go on the main channel, go watch the podcast. You can see the last time Matt was on here.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I guess that's how we'll end it.
Oh,